Alright, so you clicked on here to see a video about David Tennant portraying a trans character, and don't worry, I did not lie to you in this regard. That will absolutely be happening in our time here together. But I thought it would be pertinent to introduce you to what the hell kind of show we're actually gonna be watching, because not all of you might be aware of Rab C, Nesbitt, a BBC Scotland production created by Ian Patterson, for whom this might be the most famous thing that they ever did, and starring Gregor Fisher as the eponymous Rab, a rowdy Glaswegian with a drinking problem and the desire to live in unemployment so that they cannot have to work. Gregor Fisher being a somewhat prolific side actor whose main job was portraying Scottish person in TV. So it's a good thing that this whole show is set in Scotland, isn't it?
Finest sight a Scotsman ever sees.
Effectively, it's a sardonic and mocking take of the lives of people on the rougher side of the tracks, who came from nothing and will probably one day end up going back to nothing, as Rab deals with a variety of fascinating characters who are all basically just the Scottish version of It's Always Sunny, constantly getting into schemes and scrapes in their attempts to get something, including a little bit of neo-Nazism one time.
Ethnic purity. There's too many wrong elements corrupting our society.
What's the matter with him?
We're not meant to necessarily engage with any of these people as role models, though that does occasionally get broken with the one-off appearing characters, much like a certain newly hired bartender named Davina. Davina is of course trans, and is of course played by a very, very young David Tennant, like early 20s young, in a kinda sympathetic and kinda surprisingly a little bit positive version of trans people that cis people were able to act/write 30 years ago. Although, to be clear, that's me being very nice about this. It will get bad. It's gonna get really bad. So let's not waste any more time. You understand the premise, you understand what we have to look forward to, or don't, and hopefully you're going to understand that the clips in this video are S-tier level pixelized because I'm working with whatever shit people have uploaded from a relatively obscure Scottish comedy created in the late 80s. Give me a break sometimes, you know? I'm doing what I can to get what I can. Regardless, let's get into Season 3's Episode 2, Touch, and discover just how touching this might be. Okay, so first off, and I'm not looking to be immediately critical here. Oh wait, no, that's totally what I'm trying to do. This is a critical analysis disguised in the badly fitting clothes of a commentary after all, but on that note, what the hell is this intro? This is the most old people shit I could imagine, and it frankly doesn't really make me super excited for what's to come. Like, I know this isn't really a reflection of anything, but it is fascinating to me how half the shows I watch have an intro theme and B-roll that is iconically memorable, and gets you hyped for what's about to come. And then the other half are slow, bland, boring drags that make you wonder if this is more ideal fare to put on when old dad needs to knock off to bed soon. Rab C Nesbitt falls into that second category, and I have considered the fact that maybe it's a meta-edit that is meant to illustrate the dullards and drollness that exists within the series' characters and stories, and while I accept such a theory, I also don't really like it. Regardless, we get introduced very quickly to the family dynamics that I mentioned. The mockery between the mum and her son, the jump to threatened violence which quickly becomes enacted violence, and the disgust towards Rab himself and his dirty, dirty pockets.
It's illegal to hit your wains now, and Wine Alley is compulsory.
Also, is it strange to anyone else how domestic violence was so normalised and even made fun of, while referencing the fact that domestic violence is a bad thing? Like, I know, the comedy in this series is certainly meant to be directed towards the Nesbitt family. We're definitely not meant to be on their side, but I can't help but feel like how frequently we see domestic violence turned to and downplayed by a lot of media has contributed in some way to the parenting style which views it as nothing wrong and just the only real way to get across to a child that they need to not do something. Like, I don't know, I've never been a parent, but I'm certain that if I ever felt like my child was afraid of me, and that fear was caused by the knowledge that I would use my dominant familial position to hurt them, I would hate such a monstrous piece of knowledge. There's also the poverty aspect here, where these are clearly from a poor background, and then we're laughing at them doing what I guess is all the stereotypical poor people stuff. Scrabbling for money, fighting with each other, violence. That's just what poor people do, right? It feels kind of rude in that sense, like it's punching down.
All right.
Right! You're for the court of human rights!
And on that note of punching down, we get introduced here to the fact that the Nesbitts are super poor. The mum is going through these pockets in the hope of finding some change to pay off a bill. Something which she is not even close to, and then proceeds to begin self-harming herself as the only alternative option, despite Rab offering some nice shoes as a solution to all their woes, for some fucking reason.
No for much longer, Manahan. Look, have fun a pair of shoes.
More infighting, more mockery, more violence. The show seems to have a rhythm, and I gotta say, I think that the incredibly strong Scottish accents here might be part of the comedy, like the poverty.
Mayor, aren't we? So's is mine. Sorry, Manahan.
I'm not Scottish, I only have the claim that one side of my family originally came down from there like 500 years ago to Yorkshire, but I have no idea what these people are saying half the time. I had to play this back and write literal notes to try and keep up with the plot between the Nesbitts and make sure that I wasn't missing anything of importance. Which thankfully, I wasn't too much. So we can hurry this along to the point where Rab breaks the fourth wall and talks to us, the audience, about the British middle class and the children on the street.
So's the middle class can have a piquant seasoning of armchair pity over the breakfast croissant.
Rab, I get it, you're working on your tight five for the Fringe Festival, but come on, I've got my own audience that I'm talking to who are here for trans stuff. Where's the fucking trans stuff? Where you're hiding David Tennant, eh? Oh, actually, before we do get to David Tennant, I just want to say that this show has canned laughter. It utilised a laugh track to ensure that you, the audience, knew when to laugh. And before any of you get on me about this, I checked and double checked and I could find no reference to a studio audience or the fact that they played the show to an audience afterwards and got their laughter then. It seemed to be that they just overlaid laughter onto the audio tracks, which does mean that when laughter occurs in this show, we're meant to be taking whatever is occurring as a sign of comedy, as indicated by the literal people making it.
Away you go before I stick my boot up your bum gun.
There is a joke there. We are supposed to be laughing as well. And that gives us more of an insight into how the writers, producers, editors, and directors intended for the mockery to be pointed, which is very useful for us when trying to figure out how they engage with trans identity and the trans community. Although, with this show, I think it might be kind of obvious. Okay, with that said, we finally get to see Mrs. Nesbitt deal with a lecherous boss for a cleaning job, an interview that she struggles through and deals with the sexual harassment of, thanks to the poverty that the Nesbitts face. A real commentary on the horrifying realities that many women have to deal with in a world full of dangerous men that see a position of power as an opportunity to abuse the women that rely on them.
The job's yours. What do you think?
Great.
A piece of the puzzle that goes some way to explaining why many women choose the bear, and none of this is necessarily getting us any closer to David Tennant. I just wanted to keep you apprised of the frankly really depressing plot that sees these two women who work for this guy having to hold in their disgust about how he treats their bodies by scraping a screwdriver into a desk. All the while the audience laughs along to a plot that just leaves me horrified and grossed out. I don't know if sensibilities have come a long way since this aired, but I don't think laughing at sexual harassment should ever have been okay, no matter what gender the person is, and no matter what Eric Kripke says. It encourages the kinds of thinking that allow real-world harassment to go unnoticed, unreported, and unrecognized. Alright, after Rab tries to have sex with his wife later that night, and she's unable to do so because of the assault that she dealt with earlier that day, something that he writes off as just women, and which feeds into his plot of trying to figure out how to get his wife back on board with sleeping with him. Jesus Christ, I've got very little hope at this point for the trans narrative here. Like, domestic violence and sexual harassment have both been made jokes of. What hope do we have? We get introduced to the character that we actually care about, though. A new bartender at the pub, whom at first we see merely from behind working the till, as a bunch of male patrons look on and comment on her gender identity, one telling the rest that he swears it's a man to the other's disbelief.
I say it's a man.
I say it isn't. It can't be.
We'll find it.
Oh god. This might end up being positive, you know? It might end up being good. You gotta have some optimism. Sometimes these old shows start off bad and then come away and impress you. Right? The guys decide that they will figure out what this Davina really is, that they will see about that, and so to order another drink, they decide to call her Davy, assuming that Davina has just changed her name from David or Davy to Davina, I suppose, which does in fact match the real intelligence of most transphobes I've dealt with. The amount of people I've met who call me Louis or Liam or Willie out of the assumption that my chosen name must share some similarity with my given name, 'cause, reasons.
Hey, Davey! Dave? Davina.
Yes.
I don't think it has a purpose except to be mean-spirited. And here, where a group of cis men are shouting names as a way of trying to get a trans woman to out herself as actually a man, it doesn't seem that improved, frankly. Davina, though, only turns and answers when they call her Davina, and we finally get our face reveal of David Tennant in the role, looking, frankly, pretty fucking good. She also gives the guys a little bit of sass when they try and get her to comment on the rugby game, telling them that she wouldn't know about that.
Good result for a Sellington Saturday, eh?
I wouldn't know, I'm sorry.
Not really into rugby.
One of the guys tells the others that there is no way Davina is a man, because the way that he feels when she smiles at him is something only a woman could do, which is then immediately followed up by a boner joke. And at this point, we realise that the way these guys want to prove that Davina is a guy is by checking her for what they presume to be man things. The rugby question from earlier, telling her to get herself a pint of heavy on the house, all of which fails because that's the worst transvestigation I've ever seen. And trust me, I've seen the people on Twitter who claim every celebrity is actually secretly trans. And while some of these guys concede that Davina must just be a real woman, one of them is adamant that he knows a fake beaver when he sees one. And then thankfully, Rab walks in, so this scene should hopefully get to end, right?
Look, there's Rab. We'll let him have the casting vote.
Big man will take one swatch and it'll be head, Dame Edna. Which side's it hanging?
No? The guys want to rope Rab into casting his vote on what Davina's gender identity is, making jokes about how he will just straight up ask her how it hangs, and directing Rab at her, despite the fact that Rab is insistent that he has other problems and isn't interested in getting a drink right now. I hate this dude here, with his fucking facial expressions and intonation towards Davina, all supported by that fucking canned laughter doing its best to make us think that this is just some funny, normal shit. This sucks, but thankfully, Rab ends up kind of being the nicer of these guys, as Davina does a little bit of light flirting with his chest hair, and he responds to it in a reasonably normal manner, all things considering. Doesn't say anything out of turn to Davina, despite the fact that he does fourth wall break and tell the audience how he wanted to pay a compliment to him on his chest hair up to his Adam's apple, which is, yes, shit, and then has a conversation with the bar owner, who sort of saves this about this new barmaid. The bar owner telling him that it's all live and let live, you know, and that she's apparently saving up for the operation.
Between you and me, she's saving up for the operation, no? Sex change.
Oh, wait.
And yeah, disclosing a personal medical decision from one of your employees to somebody they don't know is a pretty messed up thing to do. Not uncommon though, as many cis people do feel entitled to private knowledge about trans people that would be seen as rude to ask of other cis people. However, there is at least the glint of hope there with the sentiment about just letting different people have their different strokes. Sure, we see all the bases for transphobia, for all the subtle bigotries that haunt the lives of trans people and make us into a mockery, but it stops short of openly attacking our existence, right now anyway, and instead gives us the notion that it is just something that someone wants to do, and hey, that's how it goes.
Creature of surprises, eh?
Ah, well, live and let live.
Like, don't get me wrong, none of these cis people are doing good. They aren't even doing neutral. They aren't even doing pretty poor. It's decidedly in the fucking shit camp, but it hasn't moved over to the openly hostile camp yet, so incredibly tiny wonders. Only the bar owner is sort of alright. He uses the proper respectful pronouns, he refers to her right, he's clearly not having a problem with her, and with hiring her. Better than Family Guy or South Park right now anyway. We get a bit more from Rab about how he thinks his wife is cheating on him, because of that whole no sex thing. There is some implied homophobic jokes, as Rab and one of his friends discuss improving his love life in the men's toilet, in a single stall before coming out to a bunch of guys staring at them, in a way that would have me worried a little bit about hate crime statistics. There's more sexual harassment played up for laughs, an argument between Rab and his wife as she tells him how she needed to talk to him about the pain of her new job, the hell of it all, and all he can think of is getting his dick wet, a pretty heart-wrenching reality, I think, that is at least brought up. It does, however, then immediately get twisted into domestic violence and physical comedy, so kind of spoils the sentiment. Really makes you think that it's actually quite hard to incorporate certain storylines into these rather cheap and thoughtless sitcoms.
Think of it as your own selfish pleasure.
No, man!
Thankfully, we do get some more moments of Davina, which is also not great because we get some more moments of Davina. In this case, it being Rab running into Davina as he's heading out. Him making a comment about her breasts and the sex change, which is not a great start.
You paid the first instalment of your operation, eh?
Well, that's all acorns, you know.
But then Davina asks Rab about why he is distracted, offers to help him if he needs it, and Rab leaves by giving her a kiss on the cheek, and saying that he is grateful for her offer, but there isn't anything she can do about it. It's kind of a nice little moment of humanization, which is sandwiched between the initial rude comment from Rab and the next scene where the rest of the pub gang tell the bar owner to put them out of their miseries and just inform them about whether Davina is a real woman or not.
Is that a woman or isn't it?
Aye. We're getting strange stirrings in the loins here.
All said while looking at her ass as she serves. No, not that kind of serving, though arguably David Tennant sort of does here. I mean, like getting people's orders and stuff. One of these guys says the entire premise of the joke here. They want to know if they're perverts for being into a man dressed as a woman, or just good to honest, regular, sexist men.
We need to know if we're perverts or just decent, honest to goodness, sexist bastards.
And, like, I get it. They're meant to suck. They're meant to be bad. But that doesn't change the way that the show has presented things and led us with the laughter. It doesn't change how little effort has been put into exploring things outside of this transvestigation. The flaws are all still there, no matter how the nature of the comedy might lessen its impact. Especially when we consider the attitudes towards trans people at the time and how cis audiences would come away from this thinking and feeling about it.
Oh, Davina. Oh, cheers, Davina. That very near compliment to him, and his just here. He's all the way up to his Adam's apple.
The bar owner finally caves to their insistences and tells them that Davina has the feelings of a woman, but those feelings are trapped inside the body of a man. Which, yeah, isn't his right to say. Want to make that clear that the only person who has a right to disclose that information is the trans person in question, so not good. And then the bar owner goes on to say that he met her while he was working as a psychiatric nurse and that the distress was causing her a lot of harm.
The confusion was causing her great emotional distress.
Didn't mean much good either.
I mean, none of these guys seem to actually give a shit about her feelings or her in all of this. That's been true from the start. It's been constantly about their own dicks and how they feel about her, so it's no wonder that their reactions to this is to be annoyed at their own distressed masculine reactions to her feminine body.
I ain't get fumigated, you midden.
Things start to get wrapped up here. Rab challenges his wife on his fears. She finally tells him what has happened off screen at the gay bar, and then we cut to the lecherous boss himself, walking into his office to the sounds of sexy, sexy music to find Davina and not Mrs. Nesbitt.
Hot work, eh, Mrs. Nesbitt? I'll see.
Oh, no. Oh, God. Oh, God, no. Oh, Lord, no. Why? No, please, no, don't do this. Don't do this, Rab C. Nesbitt. Please don't do this.
Just filling in for Mary, women's trouble, you know. Hope you don't mind. No.
Davina tells this guy that she is new and filling in for Mrs. Nesbitt due to Mrs. Nesbitt having women's troubles. The boss seems to be fine with this, and Davina uses her wiles to lure the guy into the closet by acting all sexy and challenging his masculinity. And I need a second, where, I think we have to continue the episode on the floor, if you just allow me. Huh. So this is what the underset looks like. Crazy. All this crap that I've thrown away. As both of them go into the closet, we get a shot of the door as they make some moans and calls to one another before the boss finally makes his way up to Davina's genitalia, presumably, and then runs out of the closet screaming, holding his hand up like he just touched the acidic blood of the alien. Davina follows right after, leaning against the door and finishing the line like this.
Bollocks.
The boss then hits the street, scrubbing his hands with a brush before stopping by a pole and vomiting. And that's that. Now, I won't be getting up off this floor right now, if you don't mind, because I don't think I've got the power in me to lift myself up on my legs, because what an unbelievable letdown. Sure, the show was bouncing around the pretty bad mark for a while anyways, but it truly, absolutely wallowed in the pit of taking a sympathetic trans character and using her body as a punishment for a sick and twisted man. The boss getting his comeuppance because he touched the body of a trans woman, and that being assumed to be so foul, so wrong, that it's a fair revenge for all the sexual harassment that he was doing this episode. It's the meta version of that thing I talked about earlier. The idea that cis people feel entitled to trans bodies. In this sense, feeling entitled to using us like little more than a meat puppet for comedy and gross factor. Rab C. Nesbitt breaks no boundary. It does nothing radical or interesting with its trans representation. Instead, just reiterating the same old tired transphobia and stereotypes that have come to define much of the media that I discuss. Honestly, apart from a few moments of kindness, there just isn't much here of value beyond illustrating the fact that comedy at the expense of trans women was so baked into the foundations of the institution that all of this was just considered par for the course with what a trans comedy episode would do. It's like a cheat sheet that many other shows and movies followed. Stuff like Ace Ventura, Family Guy, South Park, Cleveland Show, Big Bang Theory, The Simpsons, IT Crowd, How I Met Your Mother. These things repeat and repeat and repeat, and can be found in so many different corners, in so many different kinds of comedies with different target audiences. The only truly unique thing, and the aspect that I put center point to my discussion around this episode because I want to spin off into talking about them, is the way that David Tennant plays the character.
Here you go. $2.55.
Kinda heavy for yourself.
Thank you, no. But I'll have a lime and soda, though.
Because here's the thing, David Tennant certainly had no real control over the writing, over the direction of the episode, and the specific lines that get said. But what he did have control over is how he presented Davina. And that is one area in which I think Rab C Nesbitt does better than quite a few other shows. In many of them, the trans woman is shown to be this exaggerated masculine concept, expressed by an actor or animation team that doesn't care to present her how a trans woman might try and be presented. And yet, while Davina does act in some ways that I don't think necessarily speak to a trans woman's experience, especially the whole being a willing sexual object to terrify a sex pest,
Away. I've got bigger handles than the Scottish Cup.
the way that she presents, how she holds herself, the almost downplayed clothing and makeup, all come across as being something that is trans femme. And kudos to the clothing/makeup department here, you were probably the best of the bunch with regards to that. It's subtle elements, too subtle to do any serious work in overcoming the massive shortfalls present, but I've always believed in trying to do my best to find anything positive in the negative episodes, much the same way that I find the negative stuff in the positive episodes. Because I believe that those are so much more essential and worth highlighting thanks to what they are surrounded by and how it easily makes them forgettable. It's so easy to just dismiss everything about Davina thanks to the murky swamp that it's mired in, but to do so would be a disservice to the character's presentation by David Tennant, and I have no doubt that at least one person from 30 years ago was able to find some small solace in David Tennant's playing of this trans character, that it may have played a part in a trans person's own storyline and coming out realization to see Davina on the screen. Trans people have been so screwed for representation for so long that I do think those rocky outcrops of good in the stormy seas of bad have a value for the conversation and analysis, for those would be the things that get remembered in a person's mental narrative about their identity. I also want to take this as an opportunity to discuss further about David Tennant. I mean, there is no way to look back on this Rab C Nesbitt episode and say that it has any serious connection to the recent events surrounding David, his acceptance of an LGBTQ Celebrity Ally Award in the UK, which came alongside his speech decrying the transphobic bigotries that exist within the country, especially from celebrity assholes like J.K. Rowling, who called him a member of the gender Taliban.
Tiny bunch of little whinging fuckers who are on the wrong side of history, and they'll all go away soon.
The information that one of his kids is transgender and that parenting through that discovery has lended him extra revelations and connections to the trans community, not to mention the fact that he played a doctor who became an uncle to a trans kid as well, an accepting doctor who themselves recognizes their own flexible gender identity and sexual identity.
Just can't turn down my favourite niece.
Ah, niece. I like that.
Well, that's what you are.
We can't view all of that and draw a direct line back to Rab C Nesbitt. We can't look at the episode and see this extrapolated out from it. And yet, there just is no other way to think of things. It's easy to say how we should and shouldn't do media commentary, but the truth is there is no definitive right or wrong way. And I can't help but see the fact that David Tennant, this icon of a cis man who is willing to stand up for trans people, both his own trans kid and others, both fictional trans characters and the real trans community, I can't see this person playing a trans woman in a show that does no effort to hide its blatant bigotry and abuse of classic transphobic stereotypes, and still coming away with acting their socks off to give as close as possible to a kind, measured and reflective characterization of a trans woman. I can't see that as anything but evidential of a consistent fact about David Tennant.
How about you?
Oh, don't ask. Don't ask. Shall I?
there's anything I can do.
May other cis actors take their cues from him on how to be a good cis ally, and try not to let this feature in Rab C Nesbitt when he was 22 years old and fresh out of the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland be regarded as a stain against his efforts to stand against transphobia. I certainly won't be, and hopefully you can join me on seeing this as part of a larger tapestry about someone's life. Alright, I can probably get off the floor now. I think I've recovered enough from the Rab C Nesbitt shit. And on the note of hope, I hope you enjoyed this video, that it was entertaining or educational or served as decent background fodder to the desperate need that we all have for something to occupy the void of noise while we focus on something else. For me, it's Elden Ring right now. I'm finally getting my ass kicked all the way around the Shadowlands with the real Elden Lord at my side, my Mimic tier. If you did like what I do here, then please like, share, subscribe, comment, and check out my other videos. Some which will be linked below, and hopefully on the side of this video too. I got a lot of good stuff covering a whole bunch of different cool things in my own humble opinion. If you really liked what I did and want to support the channel further, then Patreon or Ko-Fi are the places to do that, and you can also find those in the links below. The names of those in the $5 and up category should be scrolling past the screen right now, and I really appreciate everyone on there for helping to keep this channel running and allowing me to do what I do here. I constantly have a ton of ideas that require a lot of work, and having the financial ability to go into those really does mean that they get done. Like the Riverdale video would be basically impossible to work on if I was also trying to do a job at the same time as YouTube, or pumping out videos to keep my ad revenue up and people interested. So yeah, you can blame those on Patreon when the first 5-hour Riverdale video drops, and the second and third, and because of the role of my patrons in that, the first chapters of each of those videos will be getting posted for early access to my Patreon when they're done. So yeah, a huge thanks to everyone on there, and if you want to help out with paying my bills or paying for the time to write tens of thousands of words every week, then please check it out. Other than all of that, thank you to everyone who watched this video, and I hope you have a great day.